Musicians and music lovers, thank you so much for tuning in to this exciting Deus Ex Musica interview with Datif Amirian. She was involved in our Composers Project and has agreed to spend some time with me this afternoon unpacking some of the ideas and inspirations behind her music, her sharing her own musical journey, and specifically unpacking the inspiration behind her setting of Psalm 148. So thank you so much for being here with us, Tatif.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure for talking to you.
Can you tell us about your journey into music? How did it all begin for you?
I grew up in Armenia, and music is a big part of the Armenian culture. I grew up surrounded by music since very young age, particularly Armenian traditional music, folk, and Turkic music. Um, and the music surrounded our everyday life. It was everywhere in the radio, in the churches, in the weddings, in funerals. And my mom was singing at home and when she was putting us to sleep. So this played an essential role in my upbringing, creating permanent connection with my roots and with music.
Wonderful. And your first instrument was piano?
My first instrument was piano. Actually, composing and piano are very connected since the very beginning. I started my studies.
When did you first start coming up with your own tunes? When did that start?
When I was 7 years old, I was already very interested in learning music, and I showed a big interest in talent. And my mother took me to the community music school where I started learning piano and music theory.
Mm-hmm.
But I did not have piano for a year, and until my parents could get a piano for me, I was playing on the floors and on cardboard imaginary keyboards,
Wow.
trying to imagine the sound in my head and the keys under my fingers. So I think that played an essential role in developing in me a special attitude toward the sound and an interest in creating it. And at the age of 8, when I got my first piano, I started composing my first pieces for piano, and that's where the journey begins.
That's great. What kind of music did you listen to as a kid?
I grew up during the wartime, so most of my childhood I spent during the wartime. This means that we did not have electricity for most of the time during the day, and we could not watch TV. And the only entertainment we had sometimes was the radio. Radio was mostly broadcasting Armenian music, but also Western music. So that's how I got my interest in both those uh, musical, different music, different traditions. That would actually help me during those difficult times when there was nothing to do and I was a child, I was bored. So music was one of the only entertainments for me that actually affected me a lot and created this big connection and love towards music.
Mm. For those who are unfamiliar with Armenia's history, can you give a quick explanation for this particular time period that you're referring to with the war?
So this was a territorial conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Karabakh, which is Armenian territory, was part of Armenia historically. Then, when the Soviet Union collapsed, Azerbaijan started the war and got those lands under their rule. But then we had this war, and we lost a lot of Armenians during this war, and we claimed those lands back. And they can't put up with that until today. There's always shooting. They shoot those border villages, that civilians.
I can't imagine that not affecting your music and shaping the way you see the world. Have you explored these themes in your music?
I can tell that my childhood did affect my mentality and, of course, my musical world. And yes, many of my pieces, especially piano pieces, are inspired by my childhood memories. And one of them is Echoes from Childhood,
Mm-hmm.
based off my memories spent during those dark times when there was no electricity and no food, no gas. And we would just play outside. We were kids and we just wanted to be happy, and we didn't really care that it's dark around. So we just played hide and seek while there was no electricity. And I remember the parents calling their children from the apartment buildings, from the windows to come home. Um, so this piece is like a musical recreation of this feeling of the dark and the light, war and the joy of a child that can be happy with little things. My childhood spent in the streets, the darkness, but at the same time being happy.
When you were a child, you had a sense for what was happening, or do you feel like you were protected by your parents
I
from that
did
conflict?
feel what's happening, not because every children feel it, but because I think I was very sensitive child and I could always feel what's happening around me, how people feel about it, how my parents feel about the situation, not being able to feed us, to find food. Um, and I could see people dying, every day. I could come back home from school, seeing in someone's house there's a black tape, which means someone in that house died in the war. So it did affect me a lot, and it left this huge trauma in me for the rest of my life, which it's very hard to overcome. You understand that it was a part of your past. It's in the past, but still it shaped you, and it's a part of you that you can't get rid of ever.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.